Have you ever looked at someone who seems to have it all together and wondered what it actually costs them? Why do so many high-functioning professionals secretly feel emotionally unsafe? We're unpacking that quiet, often hidden reality today. Because some people look completely fine on the outside. They're the ones holding everything together when life gets complicated. But inside, it's a completely different story.
So let's talk about the facade. Looking fine on the outside. From the outside looking in, there is absolutely no reason to worry about these people. They've built lives that look incredibly stable, perfectly organized, and just so put together.
You know the type. They lead the big meetings. They reply to emails right on time, even late at night. They handle intense pressure with this unnatural calm, acting as the anchor for literally everyone else in the room. They take care of their teams, their friends, their families, and they do it so seamlessly that nobody ever stops to ask, "Hey, who is taking care of you?"
But internally, they are living in this constant, quiet state of emotional tension. And it's crucial to understand that this isn't happening because they're weak. Not at all. It's happening because, somewhere along the way, appearing emotionally composed just became much safer for them than being emotionally honest.
Which brings us to this silent disconnect, when productivity actually masks exhaustion. There's a profound reason so many high-functioning people feel exhausted in ways they just can't explain. Think about it. Their calendars are flawless, their careers are stable, their lives look hyper-productive. Yet their nervous systems rarely feel at rest. They overthink simple conversations. They struggle to genuinely relax around the people they love the most. They feel strangely anxious after a conflict. They're carrying all this emotional pressure silently simply because they've become really good at functioning while completely overwhelmed.
Let me introduce you to Marcus. Marcus is the kind of person everyone relies on. At 38, he's managing a healthcare consulting team in Chicago. He's answering emails at midnight, remembering everyone's birthdays, checking in on his parents every Sunday, and he rarely lets anyone see him sweat. People describe him the exact same way every single time. Dependable, calm under pressure, solid. And honestly, Marcus took immense pride in that. It was his identity. That is, until he started realizing just how emotionally disconnected he felt in his own marriage. He wasn't disconnected from love. He was disconnected from himself.
Picture this. One evening, his wife Lena is sitting across from him in their apartment kitchen. Marcus is doing what he always does, right? Scrolling through work messages during dinner, just managing the endless flow of demands. Lena watches him for a moment and says softly, "You've barely looked at me all night." Marcus looks up, immediately a little defensive. "I'm listening," he says. "I know you are," Lena replies, "but it feels like you're always somewhere else lately." Marcus sighs quietly, feeling the weight of the whole day pressing down on him, and he locks his phone.
"I'm just tired," he tells her. And sure, that answer ended the conversation on the surface, but definitely not emotionally. Because Lena wasn't asking if he was physically tired from working all day. She was asking if he was emotionally present. She was looking for connection. And deep down, Marcus knew she was right. The hard part was, he just didn't fully understand why emotional closeness suddenly felt so overwhelming to him.
He loved his wife. He deeply wanted the relationship to work. So why did simple emotional conversations make him feel trapped inside his own head? Why did a quiet moment of vulnerability feel heavier and way more intimidating than a massive work deadline? That confusion is incredibly common for high-functioning professionals.
To understand this, we have to look at survival as productivity and the roots of emotional protection. The answer really lies in how we view survival. The roots of this protection run deep. So many people who appear emotionally strong on the outside are actually operating from childhood survival patterns they learned years and years ago. Maybe they grew up in homes where emotions created instability, so they learned to just turn their feelings off to keep the peace. Or they learned early on that being useful was the only way to earn approval or love, so they adapted. They became high performers, reliable, capable, intensely self-controlled.
But underneath all of that incredible competence is often a nervous system that never truly learned how to feel emotionally safe while being vulnerable. That's why someone can effortlessly manage a $1 million project but completely panic internally during a quiet, intimate conversation. Professional success and emotional safety are not the same thing. Actually, high-functioning people often become experts at avoiding their deep emotional needs through their productivity. Work becomes their structure. Achievement becomes how they regulate themselves. Busyness becomes their ultimate distraction.
But eventually, we hit the breaking point. It's when stillness becomes uncomfortable. Marcus noticed this one Saturday morning when Lena asked him a really simple question over coffee. "Are you happy lately?" she asked. He laughed softly, clearly caught off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "The honest kind," she said. There was no accusation in her voice at all.
And honestly, that almost made it harder. Marcus stared down at his coffee for a few seconds longer than usual, because the truth was he didn't know how to answer her. Not because he didn't have feelings, but because he had spent so much of his life staying functional and productive that he'd completely stopped checking in with himself emotionally. A lot of emotionally unsafe people don't look emotionally unsafe. They look accomplished, composed, successful. But inside, they're carrying these heavy, quiet fears that they rarely ever talk about. The fear of disappointing people, the fear of emotional failure, the fear of needing too much and becoming a burden, the fear that vulnerability will somehow make them lose control of the life they've worked so hard to build. And when those fears stay unspoken long enough, relationships begin to feel emotionally draining instead of restorative. Not because the love disappears, but because the emotional safety disappears first. That's exactly why exhausted professionals say things like, "I don't know how to shut my brain off," or "I feel numb even when life is great," or "I feel guilty relaxing." Their nervous system is just entirely trained for performance, not rest. For Marcus, the turning point came totally out of nowhere. A few weeks later, he and Lena were at a small dinner party with friends. Everyone's laughing, sharing stories about work stress. When someone jokingly asks Marcus, "Do you ever actually stop working?" Everyone laughed, including Marcus. But Lena just looked at him quietly across the table, just for a second too long. And suddenly, something inside him cracked. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't make a scene. It was just enough for honesty to finally, quietly slip through his defenses.
And that brings us to the shift, the moment of honest vulnerability, because that night initiated a major change. Later that evening, sitting in their dark living room, with the quiet of the apartment settling around them, Marcus finally admitted something to Lena that he had never said out loud to anyone before.
He looked at her and said, "I honestly don't know how to relax around people anymore." Lena stayed completely quiet, just giving him the space to feel it. "I always feel like I'm supposed to hold everything together," he continued, "even when nobody's asking me to." That single sentence carried years inside it, years of emotional self-protection cleverly disguised as responsibility. And that is exactly what so many high-functioning people quietly carry, the deep, hidden belief that their emotional safety depends on never being emotionally difficult for others. So they suppress, they manage, they perform, they smile, they produce, all while internally feeling deeply, deeply alone.
But healing often begins in much smaller ways than we expect. It doesn't usually happen through some dramatic movie-style breakthrough. Sometimes it just starts with emotional permission, granting yourself the permission to be uncertain, the permission to actually need rest, the permission to admit that you are overwhelmed, the permission to finally stop translating your self-worth purely through your productivity. Let's look at the path forward, recognizing this as protection, not weakness. Over the next few months, Marcus started practicing something really uncomfortable but absolutely crucial. He practiced presence. He stopped trying to fix every single emotion immediately. He stopped escaping into his work the second emotional discomfort popped up. Instead, he just started staying present long enough to recognize what he actually felt in his body. And slowly, his relationship with Lena started to change too. Not because he became perfect, but because emotional intimacy just became less threatening to his nervous system. He finally realized that underneath all that emotional burnout was never weakness. It was protection. And once he could see it as protection, he could finally start to put the armor down.
Before we close, if today's message resonated with you and you want to go deeper into transforming your marriage through self-awareness and emotional understanding, I've written a Kindle book called Harmonious Marriage: Elevate Your Marriage with Self-Awareness. It's designed to help couples break negative patterns and build emotional safety step by step. You can find it in the description below. And if you're drawn to ancient wisdom applied to modern relationships, explore my second book, Mantras of Love, based on Hindu wisdom. It blends timeless principles with practical guidance for real-life connection. Both links are in the description. Take your next step toward healing today.
If these conversations help you feel more emotionally understood, I warmly invite you to subscribe to ReframeUs for weekly insights designed to help your relationships feel emotionally safe again. Because sometimes the people who seem the absolute strongest on the outside are carrying the deepest emotional exhaustion on the inside. And sometimes healing begins not when people become less successful, but when they finally put down the armor. So I'll leave you with this question: how much of your emotional exhaustion is just the heavy weight of a performance you no longer need to give?